that it's been the next big thing for centuries. As long as human beings have been alive, we've been searching for purpose. And you know who reminds me of that? I have a 3-year-old right now. And a few weeks ago, he came into my office. He said, Daddy, what are you doing? And I said, I'm working. And uh, he looked at me and he said, why? And I said, well, I'm preparing this talk for some people that I really think would like it, benefit from it. And he looked at me again and he said, why? And then he just scurried out of my office. And he taught me something really valuable about how I'm opening this talk right now. And that's as soon as we learn language to make sense of the world, almost in every language, our first word we use as human beings is why. We're wired purpose seekers. That part of our brain that's wired to ask why is called our seeking system, and it never goes away. We get into organizations or educational paths that sometimes depress that seeking system, but no matter where we go, we have an inner toddler that's asking why? Why am I doing this? Why am I here? Why does this matter? When you think about your companies, your customers have a toddler brain too, who are asking why? Why should I pay attention? Why should I engage with you? And when we can answer that question every day, it becomes incredibly powerful because we start satisfying that seeking system. And that's why that organizations who prioritize purpose are incredibly successful, because they tap into something primitive, answering that why question. I want you to think about the last 7 days of your life and think about the moment when you were most fulfilled, like the specific moment, and try to think about exactly what you were doing. So the last 7 days of your life, the moment in which you were most fulfilled, whatever that means for you, and think about what you were doing. So chances are what's coming up in your mind is not when you got your direct deposit to the bank, right? Or when you cashed your paycheck, or when you got that big bonus, or when you achieved that big thing. No, you were probably thinking about spending time with kids, family, friends, helping someone else, solving a bigger problem, doing something that's bigger than you, connecting with nature, being outside, reading a book. And that's what we know about fulfillment. When we look at the science of fulfillment, the satisfaction with one's life, either in life or at work, what we find when we ask this question of thousands of people around the world is that the answer always revolves around someone or something else, some bigger contribution. And that's what purpose is at its heart. It's the reason for which something is done, the reason for which something is created, the reason for which something exists, something's use or usefulness. So purpose has gotten really diluted over the last 15 years. Everybody's using it as a branding mechanism or as a way to make more money, or as a tactic. But we can't forget about the crux of why purpose works, which is it focuses people and organizations on their usefulness, on their contribution. So purpose asks us as individuals and organizations, of what use are you to the world? Who would care if you disappeared? What do you want people to say about you at your funeral? What kind of legacy do you want to leave? And in business, it's called value creation. That's what it's been called for the last 50 years. We just termed it purpose now. But it's what value do you add to others, to the human beings around you, to the social infrastructure around you? And it's that contribution that makes purpose so powerful, because we become better when we're contributing. Now, here's the problem. Having purpose is different than being purposeful. So you can have a big sense of purpose, have a big mission statement, but not enact it every day. I'll give you some examples. I work with trauma surgeons who are working in emergency departments, who their purpose is to save people's lives, yet they don't experience that purpose in their work every day. And a lot of them are burnt out and depersonalized from their work. I work with janitors who get trash thrown at them in airport bathrooms that find profound meaning and purpose in their work. The difference between having purpose and being purposeful is why we see companies like Wells Fargo here in the US trademark a purpose of a culture of caring. Yet 2 years after they did that, their people opened millions of fraudulent accounts for their customers. It's why we see Boeing again, here in the US, trademarking safety is our number one priority as a purpose, yet they pressed through on too fast timelines because they wanted market share, a faulty anti-stall system that resulted in the deaths of over 300 people in 3 different uh, crashes of Boeing 737 MAX airplanes. They had timers in the break rooms that told their people to get back out onto the production floor. It's why we have the business roundtable with 181 CEOs saying the purpose of a business is to serve stakeholders, but 2 years later, not one of them has gone to their board and changed governance. The difference between having purpose, having this bigger contribution, and being purposeful. This is the gap that I want to start talking about. How do we fill right here? So having purpose is your bigger contribution. It's the bigger reason for existence. Being purposeful is contribution-centered thinking, being, and doing. So if having purpose is having this bigger contribution, being purposeful is bringing that contribution as a lens through whatever it is that you do. Contribution-centered thinking, being, and doing. Let me give you some examples of that from our research. And one of the things that we find is that a lot of people and a lot of organizations, they start out or they have a lot of energy and their what and their why is very tightly coupled, right? But then things like a global pandemic happen, or life happens, or market pressures happen. And what happens is our attention as leaders in organizations and as human beings start focusing on the what. How can we respond to the what to get through? What do we have to do? How do we have to do it? And over time, what can happen is we start focusing more on the what, and our attention as organizations and people go on what we do and how we do it. And we lose attention and focus on that why. Now, ironically, the why, your purpose, your reason, the thing that's pulling you through is the source of the very energy we need to respond to what's happening. My clients in this pandemic, for example, the ones that have thrived through this as companies have not said, how are we going to get through this? But they've talked about who needs us to get through this. So who needs you to get through this? What is your reason? What is your will to survive? I had one client, a big manufacturing company, come to me and say, Zach, I love the purpose stuff, but right now we just need to survive. And I asked him one question. I said, survive for what? Who cares if you disappear? Is it just to keep generating money? Like, who cares if your company doesn't exist? And that created a radical shift in perspective of focusing on that why. And that is what we mean by being purposeful, keeping the what and the why tightly coupled. And that's what purposeful leaders do. It's what purposeful organizations do. It's not a slogan. It's not a statement. It's a way of being, a way of approaching the work, doing the work, making decisions, the way that we behave. Let me give you an example. This is Ellen. She's a janitor from one of the studies that I did on how frontline workers experience purpose in their work. And she gives us a profound example of what being purposeful looks like. One of the things that we find with people on the front line, especially who experience purpose and meaningfulness in their work, is they adopt what I call a so that mentality. I asked Ellen, I said, Ellen, when do you find your work most meaningful? And she said, Zach, it's actually in the things I hate the most. Purpose is not always pleasurable. So one of the things that she has to do is clean the bathrooms in university dormitories on Monday mornings after the weekend. That does not sound fun, right? If you've spent any time on a university campus. And she says, every time I go in to clean that bathroom, I say to myself, I'm cleaning this bathroom so that these kids don't get sick. That's so that, right? The tasks exist so that these kids don't get sick. She reminds herself of that regularly. If you see right now what she's doing here, she's actually crocheting winter hats for all of the students that live in her dormitory, because when she goes to her car at the end of the day in the winter, she likes seeing them wearing their hats so she can be reminded, she told me this, of why her job exists. She even made a hat for my 6-year-old. There's Tapley right there. And this is powerful, right? But one of the things that we have to understand is that she didn't want this job. She said she got this job just to get a paycheck 25 years ago. She was almost homeless before she got the job. But she had one supervisor who pulled her aside in that first week on the job, brought out a dictionary, and defined the word custodian for her as someone who takes responsibility over a place and everyone in it. And she said, when he gave me that purpose, it shifted my belief systems ever since. She's been there for 35 years. She's one of the most sought after cleaners on the university campus. But she gives us a profound example, right, of what being purposeful looks like. It's having that so that mentality. I'm making this decision so that what? We're investing in this product so that what? I'm doing this task so that what? And does everybody know that so that from the front line all the way to the top of the organization? And the pandemic has brought about some inspiring stories of people adopting this perspective. This is Brittany Ray. She was a chef and a bartender in Denver, Colorado, and she lost both of her jobs. And now normally what reactive people do is they go, how am I going to survive? They go back, they shut down, they scramble to find jobs, they panic. But she said, my purpose is to serve people food. How can I keep doing that? Who needs my purpose right now? She ended up renting the bottom floor of a church. She created her own kitchen, and she started serving meals with some ingredients that she had to people who were locked down at home. She all of a sudden got attention from the news media. She actually has ended up starting a nonprofit right now that serves people who are stuck at home with food, right? So instead of asking what do I need to do to get through this, she asked, who needs me to get through this? Instead of reacting on instinct, she responded on purpose. That's what I mean by being purposeful. And I use these individual examples because it's powerful. And then you bring it up to a company level. And what's your lens through how you react and how you respond? How can I get through this changes to who needs me to get through this when we're purposeful, and it's powerful. When people are purposeful, this is what we know. And you probably know this. If you're on this call, you've probably read the research, right? We know that people are 4 times more engaged in their work. A sense of being purposeful, seeing the impact of the work is the number one factor in job satisfaction. The National Institutes of Health did a study that followed thousands of people for over 40 years, found that those who thought about their contribution regularly lived on average 7 years longer. If you weren't paying attention, maybe now you'll perk up. I always perk up with that. And we're more likely to learn something new every day. Now, this is not rocket science. So think about Ellen, the janitor. She's there because she's an educator. She's part of the educational fabric of the university. And then think about George, who's there to get a paycheck. Think about, they both have the same stressful situation. Whose response is going to be better and more productive? We know that people respond to stress and difficulty when they have a purpose in a different way. So this is not rocket science when we have that so that mentality. Let's bring this up to an organizational level. This is Justin. Justin runs a group of car washes, big car wash company. We sat down for coffee one day. He said, Zach, I love this idea of purpose, but all I do is wash cars and make money from washing cars. How do I have a purpose? And I said, Justin, I want you to go back and think about this question. What human problem do you exist to solve? And Justin left. He sort of left abruptly that meeting. And he went back and thought about it. He texted me one night. He said, Zach, I need to meet again. And he goes, I realized it. Nobody wakes up and wants to work at a car wash. We employ people who just graduated high school, we call it in the US. We employ people who are just getting their their post-secondary entrance degrees, which means that this is one of the only jobs they can get. And he said, our purpose has to be to prepare them for the future that they want. And in doing so, provide for the community. So here's what that looks like in action. Their KPI is 80% of all employees retained for at least 1 year. That's their only performance indicator. Now, these are part-time car wash attendants, right? They give them 401k options. Right now, in the midst of the pandemic, he is building an affordable housing complex for their employees. Every time an employee is provided with a task, they attach the instructions to do that task with the employee's personal development plan for their future. So like, for example, if they're going in and fixing a piece of machinery in the tunnel car washing system, what his supervisors are taught to do is to tie what they will learn through that task to how it will help them in their future educational goals. And that's how they manage their employees. Now, here's what's interesting. People from around the world want to come work at this car wash. They get 600 applications for every one position. The average car wash that's like this, they wash around 300,000 cars per year. This car wash company washes around 1 million cars per year. right? Anybody can copy what you do and how you do it, but they can't copy at your core why you are. So this is the result of purpose, not their purpose. They focused on the problem they existed to solve, embedded it in everything that they did, and you see this result. I encourage you to follow them on LinkedIn. He's great. It's a car wash industry that's giving amazing leadership development advice. And then here's how it works when there's a challenge. He texted me this the day after Colorado locked down the economy. And instead of having his staff panic and come up with flowcharts and projections, he came into his office and he found a stockpile of food. All of his executive members had stockpiled food all around for employees who would need it if they lost their shifts. And if you look at his message to me, and he's the COO, he said, the best part of this is they did this without me. When you have a purpose that's really big, it becomes the invisible leader, right? The ultimate force in an organization. It dictates how we respond to things. And another example from the organizational level is Southwest Airlines, right? Their purpose is to connect people to what's important to them. People were actually getting on them for continuing to run flights that were empty. If you look at this flight, this is a picture from a Southwest Airlines flight during the pandemic. And here's how they responded to critics. They showed them this picture, and that one person at the front was a critical care pulmonologist who was traveling to volunteer in California to the COVID response. And Gary Kelly, the CEO, said, "This is why we exist. This is why we're here. This is why I'm losing money running these flights, because our purpose dictates that we have to, if all the other airlines are going to close their routes, who's going to take these critical care people to volunteer in hotspots? We have to." That's being purposeful. So when you think about why this works at an organizational level, again, just having purpose doesn't make the difference. Being purposeful does. This is a study done by Claudine Gartenberg, who's a faculty member at Harvard. And her colleagues studied over 429 companies over a 6-year period. They surveyed over 450,000 employees. And here's what they found. Now, you're on a session about purpose, so this might strike you as odd, but they found that purpose has no effect on financial performance. Just having a purpose beyond profit, no effect. But what they did find is that when that purpose was clear, when it was talked about, when people were measured on it, when people could talk about how their tasks related to it, when their managers used the language of purpose regularly, it had a significant increase in return on assets over time. That left line right there is high purpose clarity organizations. The flat line is just having a purpose beyond profit. So again, having purpose, being purposeful, there's a gap. Clarity of purpose at all levels is most important to the return that you get from being on purpose. So before I end with some practices of how do we close this gap, I just want to remind everybody about why purpose works, right? Again, it's not just a fun new business trend. It's scientifically a basic need. Even my toddler knows that the answer to why is the most important question we can ask ourselves, right? And why does it work? Well, researchers find that when we focus on our contribution, we get a boost of neurotransmitters called dopamine, serotonin, and oxytocin. These are the neurotransmitters that control for mood, movement, and motivation. UCLA's Semel Center for Neuroscience finds that there is a part of our brain that is hardwired for altruism. So think about right now, think about helping someone else just right now in your mind. You will get a boost of that feeling of dopamine right now in an instant. And we know that through hooking people up to fMRI machines and measuring brain activities when they think about their impact. We are suboptimal as human beings and therefore as companies when we're not on purpose. So purpose focuses us on contribution, right? That something bigger optimizes our brains and our bodies. Now, mood, motivation, and movement, that's also the 3 elements of work, right? We want people to feel good. We want them to have energy to do what we want them to do. And they have to actually be able to move well. It's why when we work with line workers and we give them a story of how a customer used the product in every safety meeting, we find that there's almost a 400% increase in productivity and motivation. So purpose also predicts resilience, right? Because you have you have a will to survive. Like, what is your will to keep going? When we look at the research on what predicts resilience, Angela Duckworth, in her studies on grit, what she found was that purpose, having that bigger reason for being, having that bigger contribution, has a predictive effect on higher grit scores. Now, you can go online to Angela Duckworth's site. It's a psychometrically validated scale. You can actually take the grit scale, have your employees do it. It's kind of interesting. It's kind of depressing, though, because I am like a 2 out of 5. I need to bump that up. But that pleasure line, right? That's having everything you need, making enough money, having a job, all of that, right? We don't thrive despite our challenges. We thrive precisely because of them. And we thrive because our challenges typically make us reflect on who needs me to get through this? Why do I need to get through this? That will to survive. So purpose predicts resilience. That I'm going through this so that what? And then finally, it's much more durable than achievement. The problem with being motivated by a result is precisely the fact that you can achieve it. And then what? I'm going to end with a case study today on a big company that the biggest problem they had was they had an achievable purpose. And then what, right? You have to create another one. It's why when I go to sales conferences and I do a keynote and they shoot off, well, we used to have conferences and they shoot off like confetti cannons about meeting their quarterly goal. And then I get on stage and this is how I start every keynote. I say, okay, now what? And everybody just kind of slumps, right? Because whether you achieve a goal or you don't achieve a goal, you have to make a new one. And researchers find we feel the same whether we achieve something or we don't. It's called the arrival fallacy. If we get this goal, then we'll be happy. If we get this financial target, then we'll be successful. If I get to the weekend, then I'll be rested. And what's the problem with living in the if-then argument is you'll always get to the then and you'll need to create another if, and you're constantly pushing people forward. It's why, like, if you want to motivate people for a couple months, motivate them with fear and a paycheck, right? If you want to get a really good quarter, guilt them and create fear and push them through a paycheck. But if you want to inspire them forever, give them a purpose worth committing to. Give them something worth their commitment and their energy. Because again, the problem is once someone becomes reliant on the push of the money, that's what they'll want every time they feel unmotivated or undervalued. And here's how it works, right? No organization can get an effect by pursuing an effect. Every effect has a cause. That cause is your contribution, your purpose. Purposeful people and organizations focus on their contribution and they trust that the effect and the results will follow. I get a lot of LinkedIn messages of like students and people who say, Zach, I'm a results-driven professional. And I always write back, I say, results of what? Results of what? What's your cause? What's your contribution? I want more contribution cause-obsessed people because the results typically follow. Now, you may be thinking like, yeah, but Zach, like sometimes I just have to get the numbers up. Like sometimes we're just having a bad quarter. I once had a VP of sales who came to me and said, Zach, I love your little purpose talk. That's what she said. But at the end of the day, I'm responsible for hitting our targets. And when I don't hit my targets, I have to tell my team, you have to get the numbers up. And I say, okay, well, what do you do typically? Tell me how those meetings go. She's like, well, we all get into a room or we get on Zoom and I tell them, our numbers are down. We have to get them up. And I go, well, how does that go? And she said, well, they kind of leave, they grumble a little bit and they leave the room. And I said, I just want you to try something different. I want you to try saying, instead of, hey, get your numbers up, I want you to try asking this question. How can we contribute more to our customers to get our numbers up? And she tried it and the meeting changed, right? People's mindset changed. So this is not purpose or profit, purpose beyond profit. This is profit because of purpose, right? Profit because of purpose and profit for more purpose. There's not a dualistic relationship, but it's the emphasis. So a good question for you in your life and your organization is, what do you emphasize? Do you emphasize the effect or do you emphasize the cause? Now, most people think that having an inspiring purpose is important, yet almost 23% of leaders surveyed say they regularly enact it with their teams. Again, the gap between having purpose and being purposeful. So what are some things we can do? So a couple of things. One, it starts with people, right? If people don't feel like they matter, it's easy for nothing to matter. So cultivating mattering and meaningfulness in the culture regularly. Connecting people, their tasks to the bigger purpose, deliberately operationalizing it. And then fostering a culture that makes the delivery of your purpose easy. How do you communicate? What do you need to value? How do you make decisions? How do you talk to one another? How do you talk to clients in a way that will deliver your purpose? The best question I ask is, if everybody knew your purpose without you having to say it, what would you be doing on a daily basis? What are your habits? So this first one, creating meaningfulness, what we know is that work is about a daily search for meaning. This is not a millennial topic. Studs Terkel is an oral historian in 1972. He studied people from grave diggers to accountants to CEOs. And what he found was that the one commonality of every profession he interviewed was a search for meaning, a search for some sort of recognition, acknowledgement. And I love this quote, that work is about a search for daily meaning as well as daily bread, for recognition as well as cash, for astonishment rather than torpor. In short, for a sort of Monday through Friday life than a Monday through Friday sort of dying, right? That meaning and meaningfulness. We find that 83% of workers in diverse occupations say experiencing meaningfulness is a top priority in work. This comes from over 2,000 professionals across 26 industries. This has been repeated since the 50s and 60s when millennials didn't exist. And so what we know is that when we know what matters, when we feel positive, when we feel significant, when we feel purposeful, it results in engagement, motivation, satisfaction, and ultimately fulfillment. One of the problems with the craze in finding and obsessing about like engagement and motivation is that they're lagging indicators. When you measure engagement, you're measuring something that already happened. One of the highest predictors, correlates of engagement is psychological meaningfulness. Do I know that I'm positive, purposeful, and significant? Do I know how I matter? Because again, if you don't matter, you don't feel like what you're doing matter, it's easy for nothing to matter. These lagging indicators don't happen. So I actually really recommend that organizations take a pulse on meaningfulness and mattering as the leading indicator. And that's how you also connect people to purpose. So mattering is the belief that we're a significant part of the world around us right now. So do people in your organization know that they are valued and exactly how they add value? And I don't mean just saying, hey, everybody, you're valued. Usually if an organization has to tell people they're valued, they're really not, right? People should feel it every single day. When an organization says our people are our number one asset, I always say, then why do you list them on your spreadsheet as an expense? So it has to be felt every single day, right? That the belief that I'm noticed, affirmed, and needed. And it starts with the supervisor relationship. It starts on teams, and it starts with leaders in your organizations, including you who may be listening right now. And there's a powerful framework for thinking about creating moments of mattering. Do people feel like they're noticed? Do people feel like they're known, that people know personal details about their lives? Do people feel like they matter, their lives outside of work matter? Do you check in on these personal details about them regularly? Do people feel affirmed? So do people in your organization know their strengths? And do they know how those strengths make a difference? Do they know how their work and their strengths matter? One of the most powerful ways to do that is through impact-driven storytelling. How often do your people get to hear from people who are impacted by the purpose of the organization? Is it every day? Is it every week? Making sure that people are regularly affirmed is powerful. And then needed. Show people how they're relied upon and indispensable. Show people exactly how they make the bigger purpose possible. So noticed, affirmed, and needed. And if you want to remember that, it's NaN in computer coding language. It just means not a number when you're coding data. So it's easy to remember, but this comes from the research on what creates a moment of mattering. And you may think, hey, Zach, this is like common sense. But the problem with things that are common sense, as Stephen Covey once said, is they're not common practice. These are the fundamentals of being human, fundamentals of leadership. One of the people I was working with was a big manufacturing team. And this organization was having a lot of difficulty, really disengaged. But this one team loved their leader, loved her, said things like, she has my back, we'll do anything for her. And I went to her and I was like, how did you do this? Like, everybody else in this organization is struggling, but how did you do this? And she said, Zach, I realized that people people aren't motivated when I just tell them to get things done, when I tell them and direct them. And she said, I'm a taskmaster. I'm a results. I like hitting the numbers. She said, but that doesn't work. And so what I had to do, and she pulled out this big notebook. She goes, I had to go around, and every time I would hear my team members talking about their personal lives, I'd make a note on it. whether so-and-so's dad was in the hospital, whether so-and-so was trying a new hobby or a new sport. And she said, every time I went in every week with my one-on-ones, I made sure at the beginning of every check-in, I checked in on one of those personal details, right? It's a great example because this stuff is a practice. She had the notebook. She practiced it every single day. And that's what great leaders do, is they practice the fundamentals. A powerful way to think about this is to think about the jobs in your organization and think about if they have these three elements. These are the three elements of a meaningful job. One, significance. People should know how it benefits others. Two is identity. They should know the bigger product or project that it makes possible. And three, they should be able to use their strengths to do it. So this is a really powerful framework to think about your job descriptions, right? How many of your job descriptions just have like lists of things to do? Or could your job description have, here's the job, here's the human beings it impacts, here's the human problems it solves, here's the products and projects it makes possible, and here are the strengths we need from our candidates to do this job well. This can be used in delegation. Do your leaders say, hey, I need you to do this by Friday? Have you ever been motivated by someone telling you to do something? No, right? But instead of here's what's due by Friday is, before you tell someone what to do or how to do it, show them why it matters. Here's the significance on other people, on our team, on another shift that's coming in. Here's how this work will make this bigger product or project possible. Let me show you. And here's how you can use your strengths that have already made you successful to do it. These three things are powerful. It's also a way we can think about our work. Think about something you're dreading to do tomorrow and ask yourself, how does it affect a human being? What does it make possible? How can I use my strengths more to do it? Motivation typically follows. The second part is connecting people to that purpose, right? So you've created mattering, you've created meaningfulness, but connecting people deliberately to that bigger purpose. And one of my favorite stories comes from NASA when we were putting a person on the moon, a big undertaking. And NASA at the time had over 300,000 people in a dispersed contract-based workforce trying to achieve something that most of them would never get credit for and never see. Talk about a managerial challenge, right? And what we find is when we go through the archives, and Andrew Carton at the Wharton School did an archival study and went through and figured out how did NASA get people to latch on to the moon mission. What he found was a really powerful story from John F. Kennedy. John F. Kennedy, President Kennedy, was going to the Space Center to give a speech to launch the Apollo missions. And he went into a mop closet that he thought was a green room to prep for the speech. And he went in and he saw a janitor there and he said, hey, what do you do here? And the janitor got up and said, oh, Mr. President, I'm putting a person on the moon. He went back to his work. But what Andrew Carton found is that in mission control and throughout NASA, scrawled on blackboards were what was called a ladder to the moon, where every task and project, no matter how small, was connected to a tangible objective, measurable. That objective was connected to another tangible, measurable objective. That tangible objective was connected to another tangible objective, and it showed exactly how they would put a person on the moon by the end of the decade to advance science. So task connected deliberately to measurable objectives, which would ultimately put a person on the moon. So connecting task to purpose and making it real is powerful. Having a big aspirational purpose statement actually can be harmful if people don't experience it in their everyday work every day. So one of the things I encourage you to do is think about those places in your organizations where you need this ladder to your bigger purpose. And what's at the top of this? And how can you use this to show people exactly how it matters? It's also a really helpful exercise. One thing you might do is have people, when they write their contributions or write their goals for the year, instead of having them write these arbitrary goals that they won't look at until the performance evaluation the following year, have them write a goal for how their projects will deliberately enable your purpose. Have them create a ladder, and it's powerful. You connect people that way. You can use that in delegation, right? You can use that in communicating change. So setting that purpose, having the top of the ladder is important. And this is how I conceptualize these things. These words are, everybody's using different words nowadays, but I think about purpose as why you exist, the human problem you solve. Your mission is how you fulfill that purpose, what you do to deliver that purpose. And your vision is what will be different about the world when you're done. And having these is incredibly powerful. You have the why, you have the how, and you have the vision. So what's at the top of your ladder? And the top of our ladder is where our strengths as an organization and our resources make a difference in people's lives. And if you're looking for a template, we'll send these slides to you after. I'm fine if you use them. One of my favorite templates to use is this one, where our purpose is to, what are your strengths, your resources? Who are the people that you enact those strengths and resources for? And what do you want people to think, feel, be, or do, or have as a result of you as an organization? Like my purpose, even though I do business consulting work and research, my purpose is to help people realize their own significance, especially in work. What's yours? What are those action verbs that bring your unique resources as an organization, your unique strengths, your unique abilities to life? Who are the people you serve, and what do you want them to think, feel, be, do, or have as a result of you? So let me close with a case study. Microsoft. If anybody knows what Microsoft's mission statement was before Satya Nadella took over in 2014, Bill Gates had this big statement, and it was to put a computer in every home. And now that you know the limits of achievement-based thinking, what was the problem with that? The precise problem with it was that they achieved it. And they achieved it in the mid 2000s. And when you look at their research and development dollars and their drift as an organization to being an organization that created really practical software to being an organization that competed with Google and Apple, the shift happened when they achieved that mission. And many people have been looking at this case. But what happened, Satya Nadella, who's the CEO, current CEO, got on board. And one of the first things he did is he went to the board and he said, who would care if I let Microsoft fail in 5 years? And then they started going, well, shareholders would care. And he said, no. I mean, who would care? Think about the people. Let's name people. And they came up with all of these different stories, right, of human beings who would be impacted by the lack of Microsoft's products. And he went right to one of the biggest relics of the Bill Gates era, which is the blue badge at Microsoft. And these started popping up on social media. And he rolled out this new purpose statement that we empower every person in every organization on the planet to achieve more. He says, we'll never be done. And he went onto this blue badge that hadn't been changed in 30 years. And he went in and he put it right there so everybody would see it. Well, all of a sudden, employees started posting pictures of their badges on Facebook, on Instagram. Hashtag blue badge became a trend. People were yearning to have something to go to work for. And what they did was they built this culture around this meaningful purpose that was detached from results. They instructed their leaders to use the language of purpose anytime they made a change or delegated a project. Anytime they made a proposal for research and development dollars, they had to directly ladder it to how it attached to this purpose. They removed profit and revenue from their KPIs, key performance indicators, and employee and customer engagement were the leading indicators of success. They stopped rewarding for self-serving efficiency goals and started rewarding for collaboration. And here's what happened. When you look at this chart here, this is share returns, the results of purpose, not the purpose. This is when purpose was rediscovered and implemented. So this is when they started coalescing around a singular, meaningful purpose. And this is the result of purpose, not the purpose. And Satya Nadella repeatedly says that it was that question, what would be lost if we didn't exist? That was the impetus for this turnaround and this refocusing. And why is that? Let me close with this. When we have purpose, we get harmonized energy. When we don't have purpose, everything is, we're making decisions to compete, right? We get distracted by our competition, not captivated by our purpose. We make research and development decisions. We react to things in a way that doesn't have a bigger storyline. When purpose is the storyline, it harmonizes energy in the organization. And that harmonized energy is what makes a purposeful culture that is meaningful, that is positive, that's connected, and that is fear-free possible. And so when we think about this, when you think about your purpose, think about what's at the top of your ladder. Ask yourself, is our culture equipped to do it? What do we have to believe to deliver that purpose or mission? What will we have to value? What will we have to do to approach our work differently? How do we need to communicate with one another? How do we need to make decisions here? How do we need to train, develop, and reward people? And when you can answer these questions, you move, right, from having purpose to being purposeful. You start activating that harmonized energy. You start tapping into my 3-year-old's primitive question of why. And again, this is not new. This quote right here, leaders and followers are both following the invisible leader, the common purpose, comes from Mary Parker Follett in 1928. She was a philosopher and management scholar here in the US. So this is not new. So I hope this was helpful for you. Remember, purpose is your reason, your contribution. Having purpose, you can have purpose, doesn't really do anything. Being purposeful is where it's all at. Making sure people know that they matter, they know how they matter in your organization, connecting people to your purpose, making sure that the tasks, the projects, what people are doing are tangible and measurably connected to the bigger purpose. And then finally, fostering a positive culture that will get you there is incredibly powerful. So Paulo, I will turn it over to you. Thank you all for your time and attention today. Looking forward to the discussion.
Okay, thank you, Zach, for your very important presentation. I think you linked well the concept of purpose to real life practice. It's a crucial thing. Now I will start to put some questions. I will start with Luísa. My question is, how does Vodafone sees and acts towards the purpose in a day-to-day basis? It's more than a marketing tool, it's also a motivation factor. So how does Vodafone handles and works with purpose?
Well, good afternoon, everyone. And Paulo, thank you very much for inviting me to be present today and to listen to Zach presentation, which is very inspiring. And purpose is something that in Vodafone we really connect to for many years. And we are a company that is almost 30 years old. It started as Telecel. Many of the people who are in this webinar might remember. And since that time, of course, this is not a marketing tool. This is something that is at the core of the company. And of course, I remember that the different CEOs of this company along the years used to in a very articulated way share with us employees how we were transforming through technology, society, communications, the way people used to interact with each other. And of course, as Zach was saying, results are very important, but there are something that is more important than even that, which is the contribution that the company is making in society. And of course, that this link that each one of us as employees need to have in terms of, first of all, what's the contribution of the company overall to society in different aspects, but also us as individuals, how do we contribute to that execution, to that contribution as the company. And so I would say that this is something that comes from the inside and of course transpires to the customers, to society in different ways, but it's not a marketing tool. It's something that in fact is used to motivate our people, is used to make sure that people can fulfill, as Zach was saying, their motivations, they get their fulfillment here in Vodafone, because of course, as they spend a big portion of their time working for us, it's important that there is this connection. And we've seen that along the years, which is the more people see this connection, the more they stay, the more connected to the brand they are. And maybe you have seen about 10 days ago, we did this repositioning, this brand repositioning. I think for the first time in over 30 years, that's when that connects with the brand. So we did this, even the claim changed. It says, together we can. And it's the way we show the purpose to the outside world. So the articulation of the purpose for us is we connect for a better future. And of course, it's at the core, then the strategies, how do we make sure that that can happen? So CEO, of course, Mario articulates that very well to employees once and every year in a kind of authentic and articulated way. And then 10 days ago, it transpired to the brand in Together We Can. And the logic is, how does the human spirit and technology can be used to a greater good? And this was very relevant during COVID crisis, but only after 30 years that transmitted as a kind of a claim to the outside world. Before was from the inside out. And motivated employees, of course, they treat customers better. They can impact society in a different way. It's of course through the people that we will, of course, kind of materialize the impact of the purpose outside.
Okay, thanks, Luísa. Bruno, Luísa mentioned COVID and COVID with the related concerns that affects people, businesses. As we know, we are still in the middle, or we don't know where we are, but we are in the middle of the pandemic, at least. And how will you impact your company and develop what kind of internal and external actions and aligned with the purpose you have to develop on account of the changes forced by COVID?
Okay, so first, I hope we are in the end of this COVID. Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for the invitation. I also want to congratulate Zach for the wonderful presentation. I noticed that I really have to improve even what we are doing around the purpose and having a purpose and being purposeful. And Zach, you gave me a lot of ideas. Just also a word for Vodafone, because I think we all are impacted by the Christmas campaigns every year. And that says a lot about your purpose and what you are bringing to all of us. So answering to your question, our commitment was always to have a people first culture, and our purpose is to use technology to help people and businesses, and with the pandemic it was no different. So before the COVID, our focus was already on people, on their needs, their satisfaction, happiness, the good health, of course. So when the pandemic hit, what we focused was to doubling those efforts in order to make sure that everyone was safe, healthy, and had the right means to carry on with their jobs. We had some people that could, of course, the majority of the people came home, and but we still had some people that had to work on site. So when it started in March of 2020, we developed new initiatives and activities that to keep all our employees engaged and help them to stay in touch. Even though we were all a part of each other's, we also created some workshops with trained professionals to help some people to cope with this mandatory confinement. We had some issues to solve, having people at home and more and more mental health problems. So we did a lot of different things. Being people first, the people is not only our people, is also the people that we work with. So our customers, we've talked with our customers to understand their needs and how we could support them. One very important thing for us, we helped and participated in some initiatives to fight against COVID, like Tech for COVID and other things related with technology. So even though last year everything changed for everyone, I think we were able to stay true to our purpose and our ideals, because that's part of ourselves. And in times of trouble, it's something that normally comes up even stronger.
Okay, thank you, Bruno. Now I have a question, generation question. First for Zach and after for Luísa. The question is, most companies, at least older companies, have different generations working there. Okay, from baby boomers, now they are disappearing, to Z and other letters that will come to describe new generations. My question is, how different is the impact in these several generations of the purpose alignment? Zach, have you seen, because you work with companies from the startups to older companies, how has been your experience? And after I will ask the same question to Luísa regarding Vodafone.
Yeah, I do want to point out a couple of things. Luísa, I like how you stated that your results are important, but your results get driven through human beings, right? Like even every financial result is mediated through a human. And so I think I love that statement, through humans is how results get mediated. And what's the quality of the medium then, I think is a great question to ask. And then the other thing that you said that I didn't talk about that I should have was you talked about how you make your purpose connected to your external stakeholder community, right? In your internal world. And I think that thinking of a stakeholder world as a stakeholder community is really, really powerful. And then Bruno, yeah, the purpose and the people first, especially during this time, is important. And I know you didn't ask me this question, Paulo, but I'm going to answer it. The key is that every financial or economic disruption that we've seen, from the second industrial revolution to the Great Recession to the Great Depression, the Great Recession, especially here in the US, existential despair has followed. MLA Durkheim was a sociologist. After the Industrial Revolution, when jobs disappeared for a lot of people because of the assembly line, what he found was that suicide rates went up primarily not because of a loss of income, but the loss of the ability to contribute something in society. And he has an enduring study on that. And we see that work is a means through which we can contribute. And as Luísa mentioned, it's where people spend a third of their lives. So I think post-COVID, knowing that there is going to be a mattering and meaning deficit, people who are unemployed, frontline workers returning to work who realize they are essential, people who are questioning, what's their role in all of this social injustice. Like there's going to be a meaning deficit that we're going to see. And I think leaders have to fill that. So anyway, sorry, going back to your question, you said I could interrupt and go back and, do that. So
yeah,
going back to your question on generations, there's probably a lot of generations on this call, right? If I were to ask everybody here, raise your hand if you'd prefer not to experience purpose in your everyday work. I would bet that nobody would raise their hand and be like, yeah, I'd prefer not to experience meaningfulness, whether you're a baby boomer, a millennial, a Gen Z, or whatever, right? We have to remember that purpose is an inherent desire of humans. It's a human property. It's not a generational trend. And here's the other thing that I'll say about this is that the reason why we're hearing more about it is that, when my dad came home from work, he could only tell us about how bad his workday was. He didn't have a phone that connected him to millions of people in a tweet, right? He didn't have a phone that he could look at experiences of human beings from the other side of the world and compare his lived experience to theirs, right? So what I think is that it's not that purpose is more important to millennials. I think it's that it's more okay to talk about in work for millennials now because of technology. I think that one of the things that we can do is find ways across the generational spectrum to talk about things like impact. What brings you meaning? What brings you mattering? And so I take more of an intergenerational approach. Millennials are talking about it more because they know how to talk about it more, because they have the means to. But I think that we can learn a lot in terms of how we talk about purpose throughout every generation from millennials. That's my 2 cents.
Yeah, before passing to Luísa, my question was not about the lack of importance of purpose in different generations, because the purpose is linked to motivation, and the motivation factors are very different from generation to generation. Okay, that was one of my questions. And Luísa can speak. How do you handle that in Vodafone? I know you have employee surveys, you have ways of measuring it. How do you do it in real life?
So what I can say in terms of my experience is that, some years ago, candidates, for example, when we were interviewing candidates for different roles, they were much more interested to understand how they could progress in their careers in Vodafone, what opportunities would they have, how much money would they earn, whatever. More of they were more driven about their careers. Not so much, they were not asking us many questions about, what does Vodafone do in different areas in social responsibility. We have a foundation for many years. It does very, very interesting stuff. They were not so much interested in that, but that is changing over the years. And of course, the younger ones, they are more interested when they join to learn more about the company, what they do. Can they also participate in different initiatives? So I see that, I agree with Zach, they are more kind of outspoken about it. The older generations, they are becoming much more interested too, and they get very proud if they understand that the company really makes a difference. So what we have been doing here is, of course, we have for many years, as I said, intervening through technology in the outside world in different aspects. And we keep communicating that to employees. And in the last years was also pretty much about how can you contribute in your daily role to the purpose of the organization. So if you are a product manager in the products and services you design, how can you make sure that they can be more inclusive? Instead of asking us to participate in a social responsibility program, that's not what I want, is how can we embed these principles in what we already do, instead of designing a new feature for example, the TV service that we do. Why don't they think about that from scratch when they start designing the new feature? So how can we embed these practices in retail, in the way people serve customers with disabilities, in the call center? And RHmais is also a partner of ours in that respect. So how can we train these people to make sure that they serve customers in a different way? So what I have seen now is a shift, I must say, not only on the younger generations. We do track these, the purpose. So how we ask this question in twice a year, which is, do you consider that in your daily job that you have a significant contribution to the purpose, to the execution of the purpose of our company? And the rate is very, very high, and we try is over 87 points in 0 to 100. So it's a good score. We track that in terms of gender, in terms of tenure in the company, in terms of age. We see that growing. For example, as tenure evolves in the company, I think people get proud and very proud, but they also try to make sure that on their daily job, whether being in technology, operations, or whatever, that they can have a small contribution, because of course we cannot aspire to have a big bang contribution, everyone. But if we all have a small contribution per year, that's a big contribution that employees will do to make sure we evolve in that respect. So I see a shift in the last decade.
Okay, thanks, Luísa. Bruno and Zach, you have any comment? No.
I know that the question was not for me, but I also feel that of course, all generations are driven by purpose, but I think they are impacted in a different way by that. Of course, I feel that it depends on the context that everyone was raised into, and information that people consume, and many more, who build the personality and what people believes in. And these new generations, they look up to the companies that have a vision for the future in terms of sustainability, equality, diversity, and not the other great ideals. And at some point, I feel that maybe these new generations are more looking at the purpose than the older ones, because the older ones were more drawn to the companies that were good providers and cared deeply about their employees, almost forming a family bond with them, which is something that was easier back then when companies were smaller and almost family managed. So I believe that the older generation were more impacted by the security of their job, their own sustainability, more than looking on a macro level. I think that maybe now these older generations are more into the purpose, but yeah, I feel that maybe the new generations are more looking into it.
Okay, Bruno, I have now a provocation for you. Zach mentioned in his presentation, besides purpose, other P word, profit. Nice word for business, okay?
Yeah.
Do you consider purpose something that goes alongside profit, or it's a strong tool to increase profit? What's your view?
Well, I believe more that in the second one, purpose is a way to reach better profitability. I think that we should, of course, we have always to consider, to consider always the different stakeholders, the ecosystem, and sometimes when we are in a position that for one side we have the shareholders, the other one the different stakeholders, the employees, the customers, and of course that is different to manage both sides. But it's I think it all aligns. The stars are all aligned in the same direction in what concerns the purpose. Actually, as Zach mentioned and showed in a very interesting slide of the energy. So when the stars are aligned, all the efforts are made to achieve the same macro goal. The teams know how they can create the impact and what drives their performance. And if people and companies have a strong drive, and if they are doing and if they are thinking ahead in the long term, and maybe that's the way to achieve, and that is the way to achieve better profitability. I think that when you believe in something, you are always looking for better ways to improve it, to grow and to have a greater impact. And in the world of business, a company with a clear purpose, with a clear vision of where it wants to go, has a good chance of making it. So I really believe that the second one, at least for me, it's the one that makes more sense.
Okay, thank you, Bruno. I put almost the same question to Zach. From your experience in consulting in the States, you have seen many obstacles in this area. Show me how I can increase the profit with the implementation of purpose. Please show me the ROI. Please show me the ROI. You have been encountering lots of issues about it.
Yeah. So purpose, when it's just used to increase material gain, just becomes another tactic. So you might as well just call it, a classic, business tactic. It's another carrot. You can make purpose the carrot. Yeah. But what I see is, and I think Bruno mentioned it really well, is that and I mentioned it in the session, is that what I'm trying to get people to look at is that, yeah, you may care about all these results and you may care about the profits, but let's look at the leading human indicators of those things, right? Which is having a contribution. So I always say that it's profit because of purpose, and profit so that you can deliver more purpose. Like people ask me, what's the purpose of business? And I always say purpose. Because, right. And what I mean by that is that if you no longer serve a contribution, you die. Every organism that doesn't contribute to the ecosystem dies. And you see it, the same is true with humans, the same is true with human organizations. And so, you know, that's the way I see it, is that they're linked. Now, you can go too far, right? You can go too far and just focus on purpose, but not know how to run a business, and you'll have no resources to continue delivering your purpose. We see that here in the States with like WeWork, right? All about the purpose and the employee experience, but they didn't know how to run a business. And so you fail in that way. So I think they're linked. And one of the ways I get past that obstacle is just if a CEO cares about their quarterly earnings reports, I usually walk them back and I'd say, what would the ideal human state of being have to be for them to produce what you want to produce? And almost always they start talking about purpose and contribution. And so it's just important to make the difference between a lagging indicator, which is your financial indicators, and the leading indicator, which is your contribution.
Okay, thank you. Now I will pass to some questions that we have been receiving. So one question related more with the future. For instance, someone says that have been passing through all the telecommunication generations from 1G to 5G, and the people will also evolve. And the question is, can put the question to the three. What do you see the future of the purpose in your organization, since all the society is going to change also? How you see the future of this implementation of, let us call implementation of purpose in your organizations? And I can start for Luísa.
Well, for us, something that we started to do a couple of years ago, and I think it's important to continue going forward into the future, is also about kind of measuring it. So how many lives have you impacted through the technology? And this is not about selling SIM cards or whatever. It's about really what really changed in the lives of these people, because through interventions in hospitals, whatever projects that we have done, things have changed. And we started to track that, which is even in the entire organization contributes. Of course, this is not the role, my role, or the role of the CEO, it's the role of every employee of the company, which is how can, through your daily job and through the technology and the projects that you develop, really change the lives of different people through commercial activities, through the foundations or whatever. I think this is a trend, at least for us, that works and really inspires and motivates the people. Bruno was in the beginning of this conversation also congratulating Vodafone for, the Christmas campaigns. Christmas campaigns are all about how can technology in different moments change lives. And we had a nice one not so long ago, which was about thanking teachers for their contribution to the education of our children in these COVID moments throughout this last year, which was complicated. So I think it's about doing this materialization in concrete terms, but it's also the future is pretty much about authenticity. So this is not a marketing campaign, not a slogan or whatever. It's about being authentic and really showcasing what you have done, and not so much a nice campaign. So recently we started, of course, showing to the outside world some examples of what we do and how we can change the lives of people. But there is quite a lot of decades of work that prove that this is not a campaign. And this is a way of being in society, in business, that eventually, of course, can be used to showcase what kind of company we are. So the future is, I think, quite a lot about being authentic and walking the talk. So this is not a PowerPoint, and really people will when they see CEOs talking, so like Bruno and my CEO Mario, whatever, all the CEOs and board members of companies, is does it really translate into actions on the day-to-day? Because otherwise this is a discredit and doesn't work. So it's a world, I think, a future of maybe showcasing what you have done. It's also about being true, authentic, and showing that you care in the small things. So for example, you were asking moments ago about COVID, and so if we say we care, how do we show that we care in this little small things to employees? How do you walk the talk in that respect, within society, contribution to hospitals, whatever? So it's about being truth to ourselves and authentic, I would say.
Okay, Bruno, what's your?
So I cannot agree more with Luísa. And by the way, the teachers campaign was also wonderful. Congratulations for that. So to answer your question, I think the first part is to have the sense that this is really an important topic, like to have a mission and to have a culture and a vision and values. Start with why. The why is the most, at least where it should all start, is, again, like I said, the North Star. I also agree that we should measure the purpose adoption between our employees. And at the same time, I think we also should adapt when needed, because things change at some point. We need to adapt. And I think this pandemic showed a lot of changes in that sense, and sometimes the purpose can save a business or a company. So also I think it's very important to connect with the culture and the values of the companies, and to choose what really makes the difference, and of course to focus. And just to finalize, I think in a personal sense, it's very important for the future, and to inspire and to be inspired along the way. That's the way we should all together create this purpose in the organizations. So yeah, I think that's it.
Okay, Zach.
Yeah, I'm going to zoom out just a little bit from that and say that, Jonas Salk, who was the virologist who invented the polio vaccine, asked this question, and he said, "Are we being good ancestors?" And I think when we think about the increasing complexity of the social, technological, economic, environmental, and political issues that are requiring interconnectedness and outward focus, which is a result of purpose, I think more and more people are going to be looking toward organizations with economic power to drive the future and to drive our planet's future. And to answer that question, are we being good ancestors? And they're going to look for more long-term thinking. I actually think that, and you can get this prediction on on video, I guess. I actually think that just like in the late 90s, people were asking, do I really need a website? Should I get a website? I think in 20, 30 years, if you don't have a purpose, if you don't have a contribution that's long-term, it's going to be just like if you're a business without a website right now. I don't think that you'll be relevant for the long term. And there was a question that came in about how Simon said that, if businesses don't have a purpose, there's demanding it. It's a basic expectation now. And how do we start? And I think it does happen with starting small, Mother Teresa also said, if you want to change the world, go home and love your family. And I think that applies to organizations as well. The immediate social infrastructure of the people that are in your organization, the people that spend 1/3 of their lives there. I think you can start there in making sure they feel dignity, they feel meaningful, they feel significant. And don't go out and try to find a big purpose or find a big why to put in your golden circle. Look at what purpose is already there. You already exist because you contribute to customers, humans in some way, right? You contribute to people's lives in some way. And I think highlight what's already there and embed that in the culture that exists is a great place to start. And then building that up more broadly to think about the more social aspect once you've done that work internally. So clean up your own house first is what I typically say to organizations. Sorry, I answered you're the moderator, Paulo.
No, okay. So feel free. One question from the panel is regarding millennials and the mandatory, the importance that millennials give, even the Z generation give to company purpose towards environment, towards social integration of the company. Luísa, how Vodafone has the foundation, has lots of actions that has been developing for 10, 15 years. You see the importance in the employees of these actions?
Yes, I see. So it's much more present now, and it's very present in the younger generations. And then for us who are not millennials or not Generation Z, we need to make sure that in terms of the policies that we, for example, if we talk about the environment, doesn't make any sense that we don't have a fleet management policy that also corresponds aligned in this way, or that the purchase of energy that we do to providers does not in a way walk the talk of our purpose speech. So everything needs to be, I think, coordinated and aligned, and the younger generations pay quite a lot of attention to that. So we don't need to do everything at the same time. We just need to be focused and really, go a step further every year. Be vocal to employees, and sometimes when stuff is not aligned, speak about that in an authentic way and telling them the truth. But they are paying quite a lot of attention to some aspects that us, for example, we would not pay so much of attention to that when we were younger, the same age, I would say. So I think it's like Zach is saying, in the future, it's like if you don't have a website, it's true. So I don't think this is a kind of a fashion. Now everybody's talking about purpose. I think it's essential, and it's a factor of motivation for employees, alignment, making sure people are happy in their work, and if they feel that their own purpose, is aligned with the company purpose, that's when you boost motivation, contribution, discretionary effort, and you have a happy workforce. I think this is it.
Okay, Bruno, your people are most millennials. Do you see the importance? You have noticed the importance of this social friendliness of the organization? Let us say that.
Sorry, I was on mute. Of course, as I said before, the new generations are paying much more attention to these great ideals that I mentioned, like sustainability, diversity, and all those topics. I think it's very interesting that it's not only our employees, but our customers. We have customers around the world. And for instance, and Zach can confirm that, but the attention to some of these causes are much higher in different countries than Portugal. For instance, in the US, we have some customers there, and they are asking us about the number of male versus female employees and all the diversity topics. So that's very interesting, because in Portugal we are still not looking at that in that sense. I think the new generations are, again, they are being raised and they are growing, listening to a lot of messages every time in the media. They have they can have access to all the information that possible through the internet. So I think somehow they are paying attention to these social causes, to the planet. I think all of us, we are a bit afraid of what's happening in a few years. So I think we should start and more walk the talk, because it's not just having the purpose, as Zach mentioned, it's just to make some actions and to build from that. And another thing that I see in all the new generations is that they really want to make a contribution to this world. That's why most of the times they start their own startups and they try by themselves, because they really want to pursue something to one day, so that one day people look at them as the ancestors that started something really big.
Okay, Bruno. So we have time for one last question from João Rodrigues. It's a nice question to Zach. Less positive experience of purpose habit implementation. Do you have it? Now, how did you solve it?
To rephrase that again, what was the question?
So it's any experience less positive in the implementation of purpose in the companies you work with.
That's less positive.
Yes.
That's not positive. Yeah, I mean, I would say, well, I don't want to be negative here, but I have a high client dropout rate.
Yeah.
And what I'll say to this is that we start, and I'll be just honest, and I think most people in this work would say the same thing, that when we start developing that sense of contribution, when you start, and Louise is mentioning the hard work it takes, right? All the way down to evaluation and assessment and articulation, right? When you get into the idea of it, stimulating idea of purpose, it's stimulating. It's great. We love to be stimulated. Everybody's a strategist. It's easy to strategize around purpose. It's really hard to move from stimulation to transformation, because you have to develop new beliefs, new values, new behaviors, and then, like the question asker said, new habits, routine actions. And to create a habit, you need to change your rewards. And organizations don't like touching reward structures. So I'll give you an example. I had here's a negative one. I had a client who was like, Zach, our people don't collaborate. Can you come in and fix them? This is how my work typically starts. And I go in and I say, show me your reward structure first. And they rewarded their salespeople for self-serving commissions, the amount of sales that a person accumulates on their own. And so it's like, we've had workshops about collaboration, we've had trainings about collaboration, but yet you were rewarding them to be self-serving. What you reward, you become. So a negative habit implementation is when we try to implement habits, but we don't change the ecosystem. We don't change the reward structures, and we don't change the environment to trigger the behavior. And what I found is that, that BJ Fogg at Stanford says that all human behavior has three components: motivation, we have to want to do it; ability, we have to know how to do it; and environment, the environment has to trigger us to do it. And so the big question for them is, until you're willing to change the environment, reward different things, you'll get the same behaviors.
Okay, Zach. So we'll end this edition. Thanks, Luísa. Thanks, Zach. Thanks, Bruno, for your participation. Thanks to all the viewers. So as I said in the beginning, we'll send the recording of this session. I think it was very interesting for us. And let's implement the purpose. Okay. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks.